I'm Tanya Roerick. I'm the wildlife biologist for the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. I apologize for not being there in person to give this presentation, but I recently had foot surgery and have pretty limited mobility, and it was just best for me not to travel at this time. However, I hope this presentation will still provide you some information on snowshoe hare and how we as managers can provide snowshoe hare habitat and enhance it for the future. So we started this project back in 2016 after receiving a tribal wildlife grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We also received some additional funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And then we've also received help from the Chippewa National Forest and Minnesota DNR throughout the duration of this project. So the reason we started this project was because of how important snowshoe hare are to tribal members and just as prey to predators. Historically, they were an important food and fur source to Leech Lake Band members. They are also the prey for many predators. You may have heard them called the cheeseburgers of the forest. Everything just wants to eat them. So a few of those predators are like the threatened Canada lynx, fisher, marten, goshawks, and all of these species are a management concern to the Leech Lake Band. So having a healthy hare population is really important to support these animals. So hare populations have ranged throughout most of the northern half of North America. Here in Minnesota and specifically Leech Lake Reservation, we are at the southern edge of their range. There is some disagreement when you get this far south of their range, like if you still see those cyclical patterns of like highs and lows with their population. You might recall from like science class that typical graph where you have snowshoe hare being really high one year, and then a few years down the line they're low and then back up high, and then they're usually followed by a predator population like lynx. So like I said, there's maybe some disagreement of whether this occurs this far south of their range. But for the Leech Lake Reservation, tribal elders and just people who have been around for a really long time locally have seen these populations highs and lows in the past. The problem is we're no longer seeing these highs and lows. It doesn't seem like that population is cycling, and the population has just remained low. And so this graph is from a survey done by the Minnesota DNR. It wasn't specifically done for snowshoe hare, but they kept track of snowshoe hare presence. And so you can see that snowshoe hare, specifically in the Leech Lake Reservation, we're detecting them very little. And Leech Lake is in the red. And so the closer we get to the present, we just see them less and less. And that's still true to this day. And so this became really concerning for the band. So we wanted to start figuring out why snowshoe hare populations aren't what they used to be. And so we started the study to identify limiting factors to snowshoe hare populations. And to determine what is causing this, we had to look at habitat selection and how that habitat composition is relating to the structure, and how that's relating to snowshoe hare survival, space use, and interactions. And then most importantly, we wanted to develop forest management guidelines to enhance snowshoe hare habitat. So to do this, we took a multi-scale approach. We did occupancy surveys across the landscape, more or less for presence and absence on the Leech Lake Reservation. We looked at hare density through pellet surveys. These were done every spring by counting pellets in predetermined areas. Then we also collared a number of snowshoe hare, and we went out to their locations and looked at habitat selection and determined home ranges, sizes, and other information off of that. And then we looked at survival of those individual snowshoe hare that were collared. So I won't get into the nitty-gritty of how we did each of those methods, just so you know that we did them. And then I want to share some preliminary results that we have and how that's guiding our forest management practices for snowshoe hare. So from 2016 to present, we've collared 96 snowshoe hare. 35 of those hare have died, and about 91% of those were from predators. This is likely a very conservative number. We had probably around 25 collars malfunction, or we just lost them. And so it's hard to know if it was actually a collar malfunction or if this is something that the hare really did die from a predator. So I would definitely think that these 35 mortalities are definitely a conservative estimate of what snowshoe hare mortality is actually like out in our forest. And then those paired plots and pellet plots that I mentioned told us a lot about hare habitat selection. We found that they require areas of really high visual cover. When I say visual cover, this was measured off of a cover board. So it was so a lot of structure really helps that visual cover number go up. And so 65 to 85% visual cover is what we are seeing snowshoe hare select for. We are also finding that this cover that they need can't be just flat on the ground. It has to be raised up off the ground, about 100 to 150 centimeters. And this is likely so snowshoe hare can actually get up under that cover and they have some kind of protection from predators. And then we also found that snowshoe hare core habitat is in these lowland conifer forests. They really provide the best structure for hiding and just have a lot of those old growth characteristics that snowshoe hare really thrive with. So these high quality core habitat in this diagram would be the lowland conifer forest. And then as that population builds with snowshoe hare, they'd start expanding out into that secondary habitat, likely where it's just not as great of hiding cover for them, and then out further and further. And that's when we start to see those peaks in the population that we're missing. Right now, it seems like our hare are concentrated in those high quality core areas, and they can't really expand out from there because the habitat surrounding those areas just isn't good enough for them to survive in. And so what we're finding is that in these core areas, they have lots and lots of hiding cover. Approximately, there's something to hide under every 12 feet, which is really important to snowshoe hare. They don't outrun their predators. They go from cover to cover and evade them that way. So the more cover you have, the better chance they have at survival. And as you get out from that core area as expected, there's just less cover. So I wanted to give you all a brief picture of what kind of habitat snowshoe hare are selecting for. So they are usually, and like I said, in these areas of old growth forest that has a lot of structure and coarse woody debris. There is a rabbit in this picture, if you can find it. They like these brush piles and just really thick areas for cover. They're hard to pick out. They're easy for them to escape a predator in or just to not even be found. It can also be, though, as simple as just a down log on the ground, something for them to hide under just to help them blend in a little further. There's another hare hiding in this photo. Lowland conifer forests with these low-hanging branches are really great for hiding cover. They blend in real easily and provide just really great cover for hare. And tip-ups are another area or structure that hare would use throughout our study. In the summer, we're still seeing them concentrated in these northern white cedar stands. As you can see in summer, there's just lots of structure, just like the winter. We start to see them expand out a little bit more in the summer. It seems like with the flush of green vegetation that they're able to have a little bit more hiding cover outside of these cedar stands, but this is still their core area for them. So then outside of those cedar stands, this is what much of the forest looks like surrounding them. And the forest is almost all vertical in nature. I mean, you look at this and there isn't much you can see that a snowshoe hare could even hide under to escape a predator. And we're dealing with a lot of plantations, they're monotypic, and again, there's nothing for a hare to hide under in here. We're also dealing with a lot of hazel. Hazel, maybe in some aspects in summer, would maybe provide some aerial cover for snowshoe hare, but especially in winter and just from a ground standpoint, a hare wouldn't stand a chance against a fisher or marten moving within this area. So naturally, snowshoe hare habitat was created from stand replacing fires, blowdown, and coarse woody material. The problem is we no longer allow stand replacing fires we salvage blowdown, and we no longer allow as much coarse woody material on the landscape as what there used to be. So the question is, how can we provide for snowshoe hare habitat if we're taking away all these natural factors from which it was derived from? And so that was one of the main points of our study, was figuring out how we can enhance snowshoe hare habitat, give them a better chance of survival against predators out there. And so to do this, we started looking at different forest management techniques. And some of it is just as simple as leaving snags and coarse woody material during harvest. That's something that is becoming more common, and a lot more harvest techniques are using that already. Increasing conifers with low branches, especially like those balsam fir that I talked about, is really great. We've asked for some of our upcoming harvests to have balsam fir planted after. We did receive some pushback in that, well, they're just going to get run over in an upcoming harvest 5 to 10 years from now, which is perfectly fine. We want that young balsam when it's nice and short, and it provides that cover to snowshoe hare. When it gets older, it's not as important, and if it's run over in the next harvest, it's not a huge deal. It's just mostly about having hare habitat after harvest for them. And then keeping more coarse woody material up off the ground is important. Retaining trees that could be future coarse woody material on the ground is equally important. And then just having tree stand, just tree diversity being retained throughout harvest is important too, so we don't end up with those monotypic stands like we were seeing in some of those previous pictures. And then in some areas, some of this just isn't going to be doable, so we started looking at other methods that we could potentially use. And that could be hinge cuts, additional tree drops, after harvest, going back in and arranging slash. They would need many small piles, not necessarily one big slash pile. Not flattening the slash after harvest has been completed. So just a lot of different options that we can do to enhance snowshoe hare habitat. So one of the things that we're looking at doing, and that is our hare experimental area, is the snowshoe hare TFPA, where we're looking at a cedar stand. We're looking at all the stands within a quarter to half mile of where we can start to improve snowshoe hare habitat through these forest management techniques. And this is a stand in particular where it has spruce that's plantation style, red pine that's plantation. Both of these have never been cut before. And then we're also looking at some aspen stands too. And so we're going to be trying those management techniques to make sure they're achieving the goals we want to achieve. And then we're also going to be using those techniques if we're successful in future management, so we can start making this a landscape scale operation to enhance snowshoe hare habitat across the Leech Lake Reservation. So then, just to ensure that what we're suggesting isn't completely crazy, we started going up within a quarter-mile cedar to these open areas, and we set up cameras and just monitored to see what's coming through. We then slowly added structure to those areas, and we wanted to see, will snowshoe hare use something that's man-made? Will they use something small, or does it need to be large? And about how long does it take them to find it? So some of these structures were taking a matter of a day, and others were taking a couple of months for snowshoe hare to find. So they start to, and each time we visit these, which would be once a month, we'd add a little bit more structure if we weren't seeing hare using these. And so eventually we found that snowshoe hare were using these structures, and they weren't just a one-time use. They were using these over and over again. This structure in particular was used throughout most of the winter, and at the end there's just piles of pellets in there. So for this particular hare, it was very useful. We had 6 of these out in all, and 5 of the 6 were used consistently by snowshoe hare. So here's just another short video of a snowshoe hare hanging out underneath that structure and using it. And this is even early in the spring, not in winter. So then with these structures, we're also having a number of predators coming up to them and checking them out, and even just other small mammals like squirrels and mice and birds using them. But the fact that predators are targeting and checking out these structures tells us that these are probably quite limiting across the landscape, that they know that there's a high chance there's likely something in there to eat. So it's just an interesting aspect to it, and it's really encouraging that snowshoe hare are using these structures, and that there is hope of creating snowshoe hare habitat throughout our forest with just some change in forest management. So we're going to be continuing to do the structures through this winter. We have some other research goals that we're going to be doing, and management and monitoring that management to make sure we're meeting the goals we want to meet. So in the future, we'll probably have more to share on how our forest management is going for snowshoe hare. But as of now, we feel that snowshoe hare is one species we can successfully provide habitat for through changes in forest management practices. So we're going to, like I said, continue working, and we're going to work with the Chippewa National Forest on techniques that will better benefit snowshoe hare habitat management. So thank you. I apologize for not being there in person, but please, if you have any questions or just interest in our report, feel free to reach out to me at the email on the screen. Thank you.